quickly, just so you can get an idea of what the building massing looks like, or where we are right now. And Ashley's going to speak a little bit about the site plan, or at least the site plan development as it stands right now. And then Vinod's going to talk about the traffic where we are right now as well. Paul. Okay, I'll go over here. That's fine. So this is the existing building that you're in right now. It's about 50,000 square feet. Can everybody see through my head?
The down button, the arrow button goes the opposite way you think.
Okay, it goes the opposite way. Okay, great. So it's about 50,000 square foot building. It was built in 1956 with an addition in 1989. Typical classrooms are about 100 square feet smaller than MSBA allowable now, except for the exception of the pre-K and Ks, which should be about 1,200 square feet. So our new construction is about, the 775 building is about 123,000 square feet. So this building's about 70,000 square feet or so short of that vision. Oops. Let's go the opposite direction. This one is the ad reno version. MSBA requires us to look at several different versions of what we might be able to do. This one's the ad reno. You can see the existing building in the back here, which would be completely renovated as new, and in the front a 3-story addition, which would house the new cafeteria, new gymnasium, and classroom. This is the site plan for it.
So this is the site plan for the ad reno, and just very quickly, I want to share with you some of our goals for the site design in hopes that it can form your line of questioning as you start to look at these different options. But paramount is safe circulation, both for buses, pedestrians, and then cars as well. So when you look through all these plans, just pay attention to how the drop-offs are working. We're trying to achieve the separation between both the buses and then the parent drop-off. And then for pedestrians, we're also trying to get safe crossings into the schools. We understand as more of an urban school, students are going to be accessing from different points. So we want to make sure we have pathways coming in with the least amount of crossings as possible. And then it's also important looking at the drop-offs. It's not just enough to have a drop-off. We want the students to get dropped off as close to the entrance as they could be. So in this ad reno option, you can see we're separating parent and bus drop-off. Parent drop-off is right in the front with parking around it. And then we have the bus drop-off circling the school. Fields are really important to the school as well. And all the options you're going to see today, we're really trying to add on, keep as much of the existing playground as we possibly can, and then also add on to that to accommodate the addition of students. In field space, we're trying to do the same as well, and all fields are not really created equally, as we found. What the PE department is looking for, and what's best for the school, is that those fields are more secluded and private. So, for instance, if they were along Central Street, it might not be as beneficial because there's a lot going on, balls could go on the road. However, if they're tucked back behind the school, they're much more usable. And also, we need to think about their proximity to the gym too, so that when kids are in gym class, it's a much quicker transition out. So this option here, you'll just notice less playground space, but we're keeping, less field space, we're keeping the playground in the back.
Next option. The first option is W2A1, which was the beginning of a planning option for a 3-story classroom wings in the front and a community area in the back. So this area is the 2 classroom wings and an interconnection here, and this is a pre-K, and back here was a community area. Gives you an idea of the mass of this building on the site.
So this site design is a little bit different. We're keeping the 2 curb cuts that are existing today. However, we're only utilizing one right next to the fire station. That would both be for the bus entrances as well as the car entrance. And then you have an emergency access drive that is cut off for everyday use unless of emergencies in the back. A large bus queue that accommodates 10 as well as a parent queue as well. We're keeping a lot of the playground in the back of the school, and then we have a great field. Dan, if you could point that out, that we've created to the west of the site. And I'd also like to note, you see this blue area here, which is the existing pond. We've heard a lot that there's real enthusiasm for sustainable learning areas. So we already have this great asset. So we'd love to improve upon that and start exploring things like habitat creation, bioswales, hopefully stormwater management in really positive ways that can translate to learning opportunities.
We started to evolve this plan a little bit more. This is very similar to that plan, except now that you're seeing this building starting to kind of segment itself and play more with the site. So it's actually a little bit better. The orientation north-south is a little better, and the building is actually starting to try to make better use of the site that it's on.
This circulation layout is similar to the one you saw before. However, we do have a second exit. So in essence, there would be 3 curb cuts along Central Street, which could either be terrible or a better solution. Dan, do you want to put that out down below? Yes, exactly. So that right there, which Dan is pointing to, that is just emergency, as shown before. And then we have the existing curb cut to the side, which is cars. And then we have the buses right above that. Right.
One thing to note about this particular scheme is that it has the gym on this side and the calf on this side. And that's really a feasibility issue that we're trying to look at the potential of keeping the cafeteria in this building that we're standing in right now online while we're constructing the building.
Yeah. And just to add upon that, we've tried to create green space next to that cafeteria, which is kind of in the middle of the bus route, but it's really not that great of a space. I mean, it's surrounded by some parking as well as circulation, so really how usable is it in the end?
This is the next version of that same kind of idea. What happens here is the back mass switches. The gymnasium is actually now on this side of the plan. The cafeteria is on this side of the plan. So we kind of got away from the feasibility and looked more at what was the best fit for the site, what's the best for the school.
Is this still W2?
This is W2A.3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Side there, okay.
This is a street view right there, so you can kind of see what it feels like if you're, that's the edge of the fire station, and that's what the building will feel like if you're on Central Street, at least mass-wise, to give you an idea of really what the materials are, what mass-wise.
So, in my opinion, this is an improvement when you start to look at the actual functionality of some of this outdoor space. You'll see the gym is located next to a really large field area, which is fantastic. We have a huge playground in the back, which is all being maintained as is. A large sustainable learning area, which is right next to the field. And then in the circulation plan in this, we're doing something a little bit different. We have this long emergency drive, so we're actually using that to queue up buses. This could actually be flipped to queue up cars. But what this does is keep buses entering in a separate drive than the cars would be. And then this also creates a longer queue for us for the car drop-off as well. If you don't mind just...
That's this right here, it's about 900 feet of road.
Yeah, so right now we're using that for the buses, but that could easily be switched over to a car queue.
The massing is right now, this is the most recent. What we've done here is taken well, in the front here, we had that kind of pre-K piece that was on the road that was, we felt was kind of added to a scale, but I think what we're now feeling is that perhaps the building being pushed further back into the site and having green space in front of it is a nicer approach. And having the pre-K back here where, you know, a bit closer to the cafeteria, closer to the gym, closer to those services, and closer to the playgrounds and not on the street side isn't just generally a better planning approach.
Yeah, part of what's nice about the way the school's located now is you have that huge green in the front with all these really huge existing beautiful trees, and I think this last evolution of the plan maintains a little bit of that. And then again, adds a huge amount of field space in the back.
How much is a huge amount?
We'll have to flip.
Last time it was
How many
60,
acres?
between 56 and 60,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think it was just shy of that. We have some of the stats written on all the plans.
They're on those, on the plans around the room, there's statistics from. This is that street view again. What you, the only thing the difference here is that that piece that was here in that last view is no longer there, so the building feels further back, setback on the site.
Does this one keep on? Is it?
There's no actual next plan for that. That one's the most recent. We did finish that one today, so that doesn't have a site plan available yet. But we also wanted to share a kind of very quickly a shadow study of it. So we ran different times of the year for like maximum sun in the sky and lowest sun in the sky, so you could see what the impact of this building would be on the neighboring properties. So this would be summer solstice at 9 o'clock in the morning, at noontime, at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. This is equinox, spring fall equinox, 9 o'clock in the morning, noon, and 3 p.m. And there's a winter solstice at 9 a.m., 12, and free. And what you notice is that even though the building is big, it doesn't, the shadows do not encroach on any of the adjacent properties from this massing model. It's throughout, so 10 and down is
I mean, how many entrances does the way it's planned out? One
For drives or for buildings?
for some of them had entrances for buses and cars,
Yes.
and some of them had just one entrance.
That has 2 entrances. It's in the same location as the curb cuts are today.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Vinod Kalikiri. I'm a licensed professional engineer, traffic engineer with the firm of Venice, Hang & Breslin, VHP, out of Watertown. So we came relatively late into the process, as you may know. There was a previous consultant who looked at traffic impacts of a few different options back in 2013. There was a study that was prepared. But then for various reasons, there's been a change in the approach. The site location has been changed. So VHP was brought on board within the past few months to start looking at the traffic impacts, access, circulation, pickup, drop-off, a whole series of things associated with some school once also over here. So what I wanted to do here, again, we are very early in the process with the traffic study. We haven't finished all of the analysis. We finished our data collection over the past few weeks. Again, as you may have noticed, there were cameras distributed all around this area. There were people, VHP employees, vendors of VHP who were around the campus, the school area, the streets, collecting data, all kinds of traffic data that would feed into our study. So we finished the data collection. We're starting to process the data. And knowing that this meeting was happening today, Dan had requested that I provide an update on where we are with the traffic study, what was our original charge, what have we done to date, and any of the initial analysis summaries that I could present. So what you see here is, I would say, a work in progress. A lot of the stuff is evolving as we speak. What you see on this slide is generally an outline of what the proposal, the RFP traffic services included in terms of what Winthrop School is looking for in terms of an analysis. So we, working with Dan and the project team and the school committee, we developed a very comprehensive traffic study area. For a school of this size, I would say that I would call the study that we're preparing pretty comprehensive. I've done several school projects in New England, and I would say this is probably in the higher end of the scale of review that we're doing for this project. We did a lot of the field inventories and the data collection. All of that has been completed. If you've noticed, again, over the past few weeks, VHP employees were on the school property, both here in Winthrop as well as at Toya, observing queues, observing pickup drop-off operations, pedestrian activity, all of that has been completed. We are currently right here in this task, which is analyzing the current conditions. So that's the task we are in right now. Following that, we'll be looking at the future conditions, what happens when all of the students move to this location, changes in the mode of travel. Currently, Toya is pretty much 100% automobile-based transportation, but once those students come here, you would see a change in mode of travel. You would have more students walking to the school. There would be differences in bus transportation. So all of that needs to be factored into our analysis going forward. And then once we finish that analysis, we'll be able to identify the impacts, the traffic impacts that will be associated with all of the traffic that will be coming to this location. Consolidated school, up to 800 students, close to 800 students that you have here. And then we'll be looking at ways to offset those impacts. Are there things that we could do with geometry, turn lanes, curb adjustments, sidewalks, those types of things, but also look at ways to reduce vehicular traffic to the school. Are there ways to enhance bus transportation so you're not ending up with long lines of cars trying to get in and out of the school during the peak times? So all of those things will be factored into the study as we go forward. And then we were also asked to look at potential overflow parking opportunities as part of this review, given that a lot of the real estate is going to be used up by by the school building and related services, where would the parking go? So we'll be looking at that as well. There were some ideas already that Dan mentioned, that there were some thoughts on some of those overflow parking opportunities in this area. For today, what I'm going to be doing is, again, the first part is where we are in the process. We are in the existing conditions analysis, the current analysis. I have some slides that show some of the data that we have collected in bar charts and chart graphical formats. You can understand the type of information that we're collecting. And some of the, once we look at that data, we're already forming some of the ideas associated with the critical concerns that we would need to address as part of the study. So I have a slide about that, and then the next steps. It's a little bit difficult to see on this graphic, but so we're right there. What you see is blue dots all around here, which is about 16 or 17 intersections around Winthrop School. Each of those represent a location where we had a traffic camera that actually counted the cars during the peak times, left turns, right turns, and through traffic, and by mode of travel, whether it's a passenger car, pedestrian, or truck, so or a bus. So we look at all types of modes of travel at each of these locations. This represents about 16 locations, and then we also looked at the Doyon School as well, the two driveways at the school and their on-site operations. So next I have a series of charts that would be helpful to understand some of the data. This is the hourly traffic flow on Central Street in front of the school. This was data collected over a course of 2 days, two full days. Average over the course of the 2 days, and that represents the number of cars in an hour that travel on Central Street. The green line represents traffic that's heading east, so that's cars leaving Lord Square and heading towards Market Street, North Main. Then the blue line that you see there represents the traffic heading towards Lord Square. And as you can see, these spikes represent the commuter peaks. So there is a spike in traffic in the morning that corresponds to around 7 to 8 a.m. in the morning. There's a spike, an elongated spike in the afternoon that ranges somewhere between a little after 3 o'clock going past 5 o'clock towards 6 o'clock. So these are current traffic volumes. It's current traffic on Central Street that includes obviously the Winthrop School's traffic, but everyone else as well. The school start time and dismissal time are slightly offset from the peak, which is what you would want to have. You don't want to have the school start and dismissal coincide with the peak times, because that would cause the most impact to traffic flow. So you do have a slight offset with the school start and the dismissal just after and before the peaks that you have at those times.
Can you just say on the y-axis what those numbers are?
So this is 700, for example. So in the eastbound direction on Central Street, so leaving Lord Square, going past the school, you have approximately 700 cars in 1 hour that travel eastbound. And at the same time, in the westbound direction, you have about 450 cars that are heading towards Lord Square. So obviously the sum of the
And
two
that's between
represents all.
7 and 8 a.m.?
That peak represents approximately around 7 to 8 a.m. So that's the traffic that Winthrop School traffic would experience as the parents are coming in. That's the traffic that they'll be traveling in. About 700 cars heading westbound, 450 cars heading in the other direction.
Is that an unusual amount of traffic to have around the school?
Not necessarily. I mean, the sum is around 1,150 cars. I mean, 1,100 to 1,200 cars is what you would expect for a roadway like Central Street. I mean, a lot of it depends on how you design the circulation, the on-site pickup drop-off. Obviously, you don't want to have the queues spill back onto the public travelway and interact with the traffic on Central. But I wouldn't call that excessive. They're definitely on the moderate to the high side. This set of data that we look at, which is crash data, we will look at, again, as part of the standard traffic analysis, the guidelines that are required by the state. to look at how many crashes occurred at each location. There's a lot of data that's behind this. This kind of gives you a snapshot of the number of crashes that were experienced at each of those locations over the past 5 years. For example, when you look at the Larksville area, there were about 18 reported crashes over a 5-year period at the cluster of intersections that make up Larksville, compared to, for example, Linebrook and Washington. In a 5-year period, there was only 1 reported crash. That doesn't mean that they weren't. They could have had fender benders that weren't reported, or they may not have exceeded a certain threshold, a cost threshold. These are numbers that are reported to the RMV based on the amount of damage associated with the crashes, or if there was an injury or things like that. If it's a small fender bender that people exchange license information, but they don't really do anything about it, they don't report it, those don't get added to this. But what you see down here are some of the bigger ones down by 5 corners here. There are a total of about 31 crashes over a period of 5 years. And just as part of our observations, some of the reasons why you might experience a lot of that is because of the on-street parking being too close to the intersections, and you can't see the oncoming traffic unless you nose out into the intersection, and the speed of the vehicles, the sight lines. Those are some of the contributing factors for a lot of these crashes. Yes?
Can you explain why you had 2 of the monitors at Market Square? There's 2 right there, where the 31 crashes occurred. Why are there 2 monitors so close together?
Oh, that's because they were the road forks. We have Market Street and then North Main that forks out as you
Yeah, measure the traffic that's coming into town on 1A that takes a left on the Market. Is that
Right. They're all right in front of that pub that's right in the corner. But you would need 2 monitors at that location to capture all of the complex movements that happen at that intersection. So you can get a general idea of the number of crashes in the area. Right in front of the school, for example, the exit driveway for Winthrop School had about 5 reported crashes over the past 5 years. The entrance driveway to the school had 3 reported crashes. And then Hammond and Manning intersection had 13 reported crashes. And that's actually, as you know, that's an offset intersection. Manning Street and Hammond intersect at 2 different points. So you could have a lot of those S movements, traffic going from Manning to Hammond, making a left turn onto Central and then a right turn on Hammond. And when you have closely spaced intersections like that and through traffic between the 2 legs, that's when you experience some of these crashes. Again, a lot of this data gets built into our analysis when we look at the safety data and try to understand what the causes of these crashes are.
Any pedestrian or cyclist accidents that you had data for?
I'll need to look through the data, but I do not believe there is a crossing guard in front of the school, so I do not believe, at least right in this area, I do not believe there are any pedestrian crashes, but I'll look at the data in more detail. Yes.
Is there any way to model hypothetically how the traffic patterns may shift with families coming and going to school? Can you sort of get a sense directionally of where cars may come and how they would?
Yes, and that's actually a very critical component of our future conditions analysis. It's one thing to know what the number of cars are at Doyon today, how many students are taking the bus today, but again, it's a different location. And so when you bring all those students here, we do need to go through the analysis, and a lot of it is GIS based, so we'll be working with the town's GIS staff to look at precinct level student data, figure out which precincts the students live in for Doyon, and then see what the mode shift will be. That's an analysis you'll see in some of the future slides as we advance the analysis.
Account for the weather.
That's a very, very good point. Yes, as part of our final analysis, right now this is static current conditions, so obviously a lot of this is fair weather conditions as I would put it. But we'll need to take some of these numbers, for example, the walk and bike numbers may reduce once you get into the winter months, and then those might shift to either bus mode of travel or passenger car. So we would be doing that as part of our analysis. But also you would experience a reduction in some of the numbers, the passenger car numbers as well. Given the location for Doyan, pretty much all of the students there either take the bus or get driven by the parents. But once those students come here, some of those students could walk to school because it's closer to their place of residence. So you will see a mode shift in both directions. So there are some that may shift because of the weather conditions. A walker may switch to a passenger car, but at the same time, someone who may be taking the bus or a car today at Doyan may switch to a walk, depending on the location. And again, that's part of the analysis that we'll be doing. I know this is a very busy slide. All I want to point out on this is it's speed data similar to the traffic volume data. We collected speed data on Central Street because that's again a critical component of our analysis when you look at safety. So currently speed limit on Central Street is 25 miles per hour, and each of these bars represent this have the eastbound travel, that have the westbound travel each hour of the day, and what percentage of vehicles travel in these ranges of speeds. And from what you would gather on the eastbound travel, majority of the vehicles, especially during the daytime hours, are traveling in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range, which is generally consistent with the speed limit of 25 miles per hour. But when you look in the westbound direction, so traffic heading to Lord Square, once they leave the busy downtown area and they're heading towards Lord Square, there isn't a really lot of incentive, I guess, for cars to slow down. So you see a lot more cars speeding, and those are in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range. So there's a clear difference in the speeds for the eastbound versus the westbound travel on Central. The eastbound mostly in the 20 to 30 mile per hour, and the westbound in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range on a 25 mile per hour road. So that's something that we would need to take into consideration as we develop solutions to see if there are ways to help slow down that traffic in front of the school.
Took this data on Central Street, where is the beginning and the end on Central Street where you're taking the data?
So this data is usually collected at a point where there's free-flowing traffic. So you wouldn't want to collect it at an intersection where there's a lot of turning traffic or in front of the signal. It's slightly to the west of the school property. It's approaching the school, the west of Winthrop School.
Is this a mix of times of the year, or is it specific?
This is at the time of data collection. So the speed profile would change depending on the time of the year.
When was this done?
This was done in late October.
Dry conditions.
Right. So the next chart has some queuing data that's of critical concern when you're designing the circulation for the new school. We want to make sure that the stacking lengths that we design for the circulation can accommodate the maximum queue that we would anticipate with a school of 800 students. Again, the queue numbers that are shown here would change when the students are all here. These are just the two numbers added up together as it is today. So the blue part of these bars represent the queues at Winthrop. The red bar represents the queues at Doyan. So if you just had the same mode of travel, if nothing changed, people who are coming to the school by car at Doyan continue to do the same thing here once they move. You can expect, for example, around the 8:30 to 8:45 time frame, a queue that's about 36 cars long. When you add the two queues from both schools. In the afternoon, which is really the peak time when you have the longest queues at each school, the longest queues would get up to 50 cars. If nothing changed in the mode of travel, if everyone was doing what they're doing today, you would be somewhere in the order of about 50 cars, which translates to approximately 1,000 linear feet of stack. When you do that, you want to make sure that the stack that we have for the new school can support queues of that length again, adjusted for change in mode of travel, weather conditions, more kids on the bus versus more kids in the car. So a lot of those things we usually do sort of a range of numbers for that reason. So you could have an optimal condition, so spring condition or early fall when you could have a lot of walkers and bikers versus January and February where you could have a lot more kids being dropped off and picked up by parents. So you could have a range of numbers, and some of these would fluctuate depending on the time of year. Another chart that we have here is about pedestrian activity at the two schools. As you can imagine, given the location of Toya, there isn't really a lot of pedestrian activity at that school. Most kids are driven or take the bus. So all of these blue bars represent the number of students that currently come to Winthrop that are actually walking to school. So in the morning, you'll see it in 15-minute increments. For example, we need 30, you need 45, and about 14 students that walk to school in that 15-minute window.
Those numbers also include students that are being dropped off on Main Street or Menlo Street, walking to the school site from there.
So the way we had deployed our observers, so that was a critical question from the school committee to distinguish between students that walk to school from home, door-to-door walking, versus students that would get dropped off, let's say, as you said, on Mineral or Washington. So these are students that were not dropped off. I mean, it's possible that some of these kids may have been dropped off on Warren Street. I don't know if they may get dropped off on High Street. I don't know if anyone would do that. But we had observers all around the school property to see if there were any kids that are being dropped off by parents, and then the kids were walking into school, and we tracked those separate from kids that were just walking from a longer distance. But it is possible that they may have been dropped off at a farther distance, and they would have been counted as part of the walkers.
So we have about 40 kids walking.
Right, I have a chart after this that kind of consolidates all of these numbers. And then this looks at, I would think that these numbers would probably stay stable for the school, because this is mostly staff parking. So the blue again is the peak parking demand for Winthrop, and then red is the peak parking demand for Toya, adding up to around 145 cars plus or minus during the peak time. So that was around 9 a.m. So school, everyone was in the school, staff was on the property. Then we also did an observation around 2:30 in the afternoon, and it dropped a little bit, but not much. So you're looking at somewhere in the order of 140 to 150 car parking demand when you add the staff members for both schools together. I apologize for the color scheme. It looks a lot sharper in the actual slides, but this is a chart that we developed to kind of break up the total enrollment for each school. For example, take Winthrop. At the time of our traffic count, what were the different modes of travel for the students? So you see the 115 students who got dropped off on the school property, about 16 students who got dropped outside the school, so they could have been dropped off on Mineral or on Manning or on Central. There wasn't a lot of drop off on Central. Actually, the data showed that majority of the drop off of the 16, I would say, almost all of that was either on Mineral or on Manning Street. There were cars that were stopping on Central, but a lot of those were associated with the Cumberland Farms. So someone would park on the street, run in, grab coffee or something, and they would jump back into the car and leave. So there were cars stopped on Central, but they weren't associated with the school. Most of the school-related drop-off outside of the school happened on the two adjacent streets. And then a pretty sizable number for bus, and then we had a number for other, which is essentially students who weren't in the school that day. This is an estimated number. We don't have an exact number of how many kids weren't in school that day. But once we accounted for all of the other members, the remaining number would be students that possibly weren't at school that day. But this gives you an idea of the split, the mode split between different modes of travel today, the two schools where they're located. And once you add up all these numbers and then change the mode of travel, you end up with a whole set of a different bar chart like this that represents the numbers that we would need to deal with. And we might have two of those bars, one for fair weather conditions and then one for sort of the peak winter conditions. Based on some of the data that we've already analyzed and broken down at this point, and looking at some of those charts that I just presented, things that we would need to focus on closely to make sure that the design of the circulation is appropriate for the new school will be focused on these items. Queue management would be very critical, and for all the reasons we talked about, you don't want to have the cars spilling out on the public street. You don't want to have cars lined up on adjacent neighborhood streets with cars, students being dropped off and picked up. So we need to focus on queue management and how it plays with the pickup and drop off operations. And as Ashley mentioned during the previous part of the presentation, the separation of the parent vehicles and the buses is also a critical component. You don't want to have parent vehicles and buses commingle in the same travel lane. So you want to separate out the two paths of travel for safety and other reasons. Parking, overflow parking is definitely a critical aspect of it, 140 to 150 cars, how we would accommodate those. Some of it may be on-site, some of it will be off-site. And then once we run all the analysis, we will be able to identify the physical roadway improvements that would be needed, not only to take care of the impact of the school traffic, but also to address some of the existing deficiencies that are out there, being speeding, or crash data, or sight lines, the various things that if we need to make any adjustments, we would also identify things that could be done to address some of the existing deficiencies that are out there. And then the last thing to focus on ways to enhance maybe use of the bus, so you don't have as many cars coming to the school. It helps reduce the vehicular traffic, it helps reduce queuing, and it helps improve the overall traffic operations.
How short is the on-site parking from the 140 spots that you need?
That varies from plans, so as you work your way around the room, you're going to see some plans have about 80 spaces and other plans only have 50 or 60. So it really is totally based on that scheme.
Okay, so the parking ranges from, you said,
80 spaces?
from 80 to
Say 50.
50, depending on the plan.
Okay, so what we'd like to do now is we'd like to break you guys all up into 4 groups. This is station 1, 2, 3 in the back, and 4 is over here. We'd like to have everyone spend about 10-12 minutes. Mr. Hopping will be keeping time for us, and we'll rotate you through. And so, again, the idea is to look at the plans. We'll have the architect will float around. The two, Sheila and Sheila, will be at a couple of the stations to answer some questions. We'd like to have you guys write up and think of the benefits and the challenges of the 4 sites. So if we just make it really simple, if I can tell you principle for a moment. The first few rows here, you go to station 1, the few in the back, go to station 2, and the same over here, the front 3 rows to station 4, and then back there. And we'll rotate around